So here we are. Welcome, everybody, to this new session of the CIVIS Gender Studies Network seminars, lectures. Here we are in Rome this time for the first seminar of 4. I will tell you about the other 3 at the end of the seminar, just to remind you the dates and the topics. I'm Marcella Corsi. I'm the coordinator of Minerva, the Laboratory on Diversity and Gender Inequality of Sapienza University of Rome. And I'm really happy to have here with me Silvia Lucciarini. She will introduce herself in a second, much better than I could do. But I start saying that she's a newcomer in Minerva. So it's her first time, actually, that she presents with us. So I welcome her as well, and I give her the floor immediately. We have a seminar for 30 minutes, and then we have, hopefully, a very fruitful discussion. Silvia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Marcella, really, for the opportunity. I'm very happy to be here. I'm an assistant professor of economic sociology at Sapienza Università di Roma. I have the honor to meet Marcella in a seminar, in a workshop, and then just by chance, we just keep falling to each other, and one thing lead to another, and we have the chance to discuss about research. And I'm not properly a gender studies scholar, but I'm learning, and the research I will presenting you in a few minutes, it's really expressed my 2 souls. I'm an economic sociology on one hand, and in soccer I got a PhD on urban studies, and so I try to mix it up in the last 20 years, and I try to show you the research about gender, precariousness, and housing policy, emergency housing policy in Rome. I always have got some performance issue, so I hope to be enough calm and clear, and I try to share my presentation right now so we can start. Okay, I hope it works. Please let me know if there are any problems.
Everything is fine.
Thank you very much. Relaxing. This presentation is about the overlapping of 2 kinds of precariousness that affected women and housing policies in Rome. One is economic, and the other one is related to housing and emergency housing and housing solution that the public administration, which public administration try to address the housing emergency of women. That's what we are going to share in the following 20-25 minutes. Brief theoretical framework, the data and the methods we use, the case study background, the main findings, and then few concluding remarks. So, in that research, we try to combine 2 different theoretical frameworks. On one hand, the contextual political analysis. That means a very contextual political analysis is a framework where everything matters. Culture matters, place matters, institution matters, and so on. And it tries to have a critical dialogue with the policy and economic mainstream theory. So at the beginning, we choose to use a critical approach that it suits our analysis. Then we try to link that to the relational inequalities in public administration and in organization. In organization, it's something very new, but of course, it's not a recent theoretical framework. The main scholar in that field is Stephen Ballas, and it's an approach that tries to combine the different layers of the social, economic, and cultural building of inequalities. It means that everything is, every public policy and their delivery, it depends a lot in which way you set the agenda, the topic, and of course, I've got a lot of biases. So just to let you aware of the type of setting that we use in that research. Then we have to choose an analytical framework, and we decide to use the policy instruments analytical framework by La Scuma Legales, and probably maybe you know that kind of analytical framework, and that said that in order to understand public policy, you have to look at the instruments with which public policy are delivered. That means that policy instruments are not neutral. Policy instruments always affect cultural and intention only if you look at the way, at the instruments that they are used to deliver the public policy, generally defined. In that specific case, we use the mainstreaming as a policy instrument. So we study how the housing policy, emerging housing policies are developed by the local administration. The case study is Rome. And we analyze the mainstreaming as an instrument of local housing policies. On one hand, mainstreaming as a tool, as a policy instrument, contribute to what? To stabilize the representation of an issue. In that case, house emergency is a mainstreaming tool and instruments that affect public policy and public debates and institutional discourse, and it gives the idea, using the Schmidt vocabulary, that housing problem, housing policy is so radicate and it's impossible to plan. And so all the solutions are suboptimal solution, and decide implementing and also addressing as an emergency issue. It seems something that you cannot plan, and that it's very, very mainstreaming the housing policy in Rome. I always said, yes, please, I don't know. Please let me know, is everything okay? And then we try to analyze in which way mainstreaming as policy instruments affect or not women. And thank you, sorry. I'm not exactly the one who updates everything, no ResearchGate, no academia. I'm completely disaster about that, but thank you. So what we've been seeing is that mainstreaming as policy tools penalizing women through narratives and related policy measures. In particular, the mainstreaming, it means official documents, public discourses, public forums, discourses between institutional stakeholders. We check many sources. And we recognize that there are boundaries between deserving and less deserving women that are addressed by housing public policy, in particular housing emergency public policies. That is a standard situation in Rome. It seems that housing emergency, of course, is a mainstream. That's why we use it. So, first league, very soccer-friendly vocabulary in that occasion. First league of the beneficiary of housing policies and emergency housing policies are traditional families, mainly if those families have care duty, elderly and with people with disability. And then there's a second league where single person and women are overrepresented in that kind of target. So as you can see, mainstreaming public policy means in a kind of way decide the boundary between who deserve more. But it's not only theoretical. The mainstreaming in that way is linked to the ranking, how the people who ask for public housing, temporary or permanent, that kind of mainstreaming affects in which way the ranking are built. So it's it really affects the beneficiaries of that kind of public policies. I don't know why. Okay. I know. Okay. So we use a mixed methods approach. We run a lot of administrative data. We interview few key informants. It means root association, housing rights association, policymakers in more or less 10 years. Because we started the research in 2008, and after 10 years, in 2018, we ran a second wave, even if it's not a longitudinal analysis of that research. We like to see if something's changed, and it's not. Then we try to focus which are our targets. And so we decide a simple strategy, in particular women forced to move. And after an eviction, you can apply to a permanent or a temporary housing solution, public housing solution. And the boundary between temporary and permanent, it's completely depends in which way the public administration mainstream your situation. We use 15 life stories that we analyze because we'd like to see a lot of vulnerability. We'd like to understand after an eviction if the situation of women divided in temporary or permanent housing solution, they differ how So after we checked the data, we decided to interview single women aged between 45 and 60 years who either work or receive a pension and who face eviction due to the end of the lease. And after the end of the lease, these women found impossible to find housing at the current market prices because in the meanwhile, there's a considerable increasing of housing price for rentiers logic. I skip into that in these are women who typically paid rent ranging 400 to 500 euros per month. And then the ratio of the rent for the same apartment triplicate. So they cannot afford house at the market price. And so they try to address the situation by public policy, temporary or permanent. What about the numbers? In general, I skip the numbers. What I like to say that it's very colorful is that to address the current numbers of housing request, that in mainstream they call it housing emergency, but in a pragmatical perspective is the number of requests for housing for public housing. And if you go to the numbers, you see that to address the current numbers, it would take 260 years to respond to all the application for public housing. So you can see how the mainstreaming, not only because these are the numbers, but these are the numbers and it's impossible to plan. And it's why the public issue were framed in our theory. In our specific case, an average of 40,000 women per year seek assistance from the municipality of Rome because they are in housing emergency following an eviction. So there are no possibility to pay rent in the private market. Also because these women has, and this, you know that there's a gender gap, that there's a problem about women wages. So they are weak, they are disadvantaged in about wages. They cannot afford rent at the market prices. They went to public assistance. They are in the second league, so they cannot receive a permanent housing solution. They can only reach a temporary solution. Means that you stay in the residence. That now I will explain briefly to you what residents are in the housing policy of Rome. So as you can see, there's a boundaries, events, specific moments where these women lose the anchor of their lives and the possibility to have opportunities in terms of housing solution, public or private. Among the 8 women evicted for non-payment of rent, there are 3 over 65 years old. 2 of these women are disabled beyond the age of 65. 2 are with disability, 2 are single mothers with dependency children, and one is an immigrant. More or less, this is the social composition of that sample of women who seek assistance from the municipality of Rome yearly. What about the timeline? More or less, everything started in 2005 during Veltroni's mayor. So it's center-left tenure. And they decided in that moment, in 2005, to investing in privately owned buildings. So the municipality pay the rent of those buildings. And that are they in the administration minds, those buildings serve to respond to this temporary emergency, waiting for a more permanent. Then, but more permanent solution, it's already not on the floor. Mainly because the housing market, due to also Airbnb, touristicization, many processes, put under stress the housing market. So then other mayor, more or less, they are Marino, Virginia Raggi, Gualtieri are center-left. And all these mayors, during the time, try to address the housing emergency, as they mainstream it, with these temporary residents, where person as single women are the main beneficiary because they ranked less in the public ranking. So that's there's a quite a there's no opportunity to other solutions because of the way in which public policy and public solution were established by the different local administrations. And we say that it depends in which way the public issues is a framework and define using the mainstream as a housing emergency. I try to connecting the dot. So, which are our main findings? The women condition following eviction appears to transition from a daily life of certainties. It's like a spiral from certainty to a permanent uncertainty. And it brings, for example, not only housing assistance, but also social and healthcare services. So it seems that from the housing eviction, then temporary, so suboptimal solution, and it brings illness, social and in terms of human health. Then we say that the political construction and reproduction of structural housing disadvantages toward women revolve around 2 points. One is normative, when following legislative measures that exclude single women who are not caregivers from the eviction moratorium. And it means that if you are, if you've got care duties, you can apply to an eviction moratorium. So you can wait. The municipality sustain you in the process to wait the eviction, but not for the single women. and this, of course, a disadvantage, a building disadvantage. And the second is systemic, as many women cannot be allocated in public housing despite their seniority in the eviction list, because there is a correspondence between the squares, the size of the house, and the number of people. There are not so many small apartments in the public housing program, and so many women who were at the top of the list cannot find their housing match, and so it's kind of twofold boundary and inequalities that lead these women to temporary solution. Temporary solution means that you live in the extreme periphery. You haven't got the key of your house because there is a doorman. You have to report if you will host some friends or do some social life. It means that you are very controlled. That means permanent solution in the housing settlement in Rome. Using that end of categories, the exclusion of adult women seems to pertain more to the aspect of entitlements. That means that we address as a problem of broadening the membership of citizenship. You have the rights because your situation as you have to change the way in which your situation are addressed by, or these situations are addressed by public policies. Because if not, there's a unperfect match, and then you're out and you have to stay in this temporary housing settlement. That it brings, as I try to say, many illness in terms of social life and health situation. That's it. I finished my presentation. A couple of references, one in Italian, one in French, and
Thank you so much, Silvia.
Thank you.
Thank you, really. You can leave the references on if you like. In the meantime, I also put those references in the chat, so everybody could have access to them. And as you have seen, I also put the link to your website without asking you, but just to let them know who you are a little bit more. So now we open officially the discussion. I see friends here that were with me at in Ferrara a few days ago, and some of these topics has been discussed there. Just to open the discussion, I would like to remind to those of you who were there that we had the opportunity to discuss also a standard architecture during the fascist time devoted to housing for single, that was the title, actually, housing for singles. But as a matter of fact, those housing for singles were just for men singles. Women were not considered possible singles. And if they were, probably had to be in the monastery or taking care of their young or their old parents, according to the fascist time. But from what you have shown us, I think the situation is not so different nowadays, since to be entitled you must have a big family and so on. So as we certainly know, stereotypes and sometimes even stigmas resist to time, especially in a country like ours and in a town like ours, talking of course about Rome. But I would like to leave the floor to our friends, to our colleagues, to our students. There are some students attending the seminar as well. So who would like to start? You can either raise your hand or just open your microphone, or write in the chat, of course. I see also Chiara Bellingardi has arrived. I've seen already Claudia, Barbara, Silvia. They're all experts in this field, so don't be shy. The floor is yours. Any comment is welcome. I see the face of Chiara now. I don't know whether this means that she wants to ask a question. Anyway, I see also Angela Toffanin from the National Research Council. Thank you, Angela, for joining us. Chiara, please.
I can break the ice.
Please do.
Just to start. Well, thank you, first of all, very much for this interesting sight on the problem. I think that is a challenge to bring mainstreaming point of view, gender mainstreaming point of view in housing policies. As well, we generally we talk about household or family. So we know that in the family it can be a single woman or a single man or whatever, but it's family, how we think about household and houses problem. And that's my first comment, if you have some comment about it. And the second thing is that I am currently making research about gender point of view on housing, and now I am working on the law for public housing in the different regions, confronting, but I'm sorry for my bad English. Now I have lost the right word, comparing the different laws, and I see that some of them have generally some points that are for women, especially for women escaping domestic violence. Just a few, just Campania or other, just a few region. But I wonder if you, and also Lazio region have something. I wonder if you had the chance to go more in deep about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara. Thank you. Any other comment or question or criticism, of course? And for sure, I would like to know from Silvia whether they plan to repeat this type of analysis. They have something in the pipeline concerning an updating of this research with the new administration in Rome. Silvia has written something in the chat, but please, Silvia, please, if you want, open the microphone. Silvia is a PhD student from University of Teramo.
Yeah. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Silvia, and I'm curious about this argument because I'm studying gender mainstream theories, and in particular, I'm curious to ask if these indicators that you are considering your research in your work, excluding penalizing women in the about the intersection, I mean, race and class, sexual orientation or disability. For example, if the policy about inclusion in this planning of including in the houses, etc., including also the all these indicators. Sorry for my English. In public,
Silvia,
I'm anxious, but
Silvia is
thank
very
you.
fluent in Spanish and Portuguese, actually in Brazilian, as a matter of fact. Thank you for
Thank you.
actually for telling us what you had in mind. Yeah, in fact, Silvia, I mean, you mentioned immigrant, of course, as a typology. But I wonder whether I mean, in the period that you have considered, so between 2008 and 2018, due to the immigration flows and so on, things have changed in that sense. And plus, for sure, immigrants, when they manage to arrive here with all their families, very often have quite larger families compared with the national ones, and we know that this gives them often the rights to have access to social housing. We also know that in some parts of our town there have been conflicts for this reason between the natives and the immigrants. So I wonder whether you want to add something else about this. Thank you, Silvia, for raising the issue anyway. Shall we go for a first round, Silvia? And then let's see whether others wants to add any comment.
Yes, please. Yes, it's a challenging point of view because the brick of public policies in that kind of field are families. So we're talking about residual policy. And there's many, I give you, sorry, it's my topic. So I use something that I know maybe better. There is the number of working contracts that we have in Italy. It's a metaphor. We've got something like 700 and few kind of working contracts. It's very difficult to decide who has the right to do something and which are the protections because of the large numbers of contracts. Fragmentation doesn't help the who made the laws and to think about a target and a way to address and implement a solution to that public issues. So, for example, in housing policy means that the mainstream solution are for families, and that of course it's something that builds inequalities. It means that if you're talking about, at least in Lazio region, if you're talking about domestic violence and shelter shelter as a legal term has got something that addresses to other problems. No? That it means the way language as powerful instrument to say something. In domestic violence in Lazio, respondents were addressed to another normative structure that is not housing policy. It means that you've got a lot of stakeholders, a lot of different institutional level. Means that the municipi, that in Roma, the kind of small section of the city, administrative, and someone called them mini cities because they work sometimes as a small city inside the big city. So there's a lot of fragmentation, and it really depends on the structure, the classical division between structure and agency. Structure is really place-based, and agency as well. is really place-based. So about domestic, for example, domestic violence and housing solution, it really depends on structure and agency. They are really place-based, mainly in these, we call it municipi, that are these 19, nowadays, there's a small part of cities works like city in terms of administrative and public administration. And so, so I think that fragmentation could be the key word in that kind of thinking. Then what about immigrants? It really depends about the how some rankings were made by the local administration. It means that if the administration, if the local, the place-based administration has a sensibility about these issues, and maybe there's a many solutions in the economic deprived areas, because there are cohabitants between native and immigrants that mostly are, of course, there's a issue about gain the Italian citizenship, but mostly are second generations of immigrants. So it's some authors call it denizensship. It means that you can have some benefit, but you're not a full citizen, and so you can not have access to the full range or portfolio of the rights and the benefits in Italian citizenship. So I think that space and place-based on one hand and stakeholders on the others are determinant in the situation. It means that you have not the public administration has not defined a clear line of rights, and there's many reasons about that, and one is about the public expenses. If you fix the term of rights, then you have to respect it. So you have to divide all the who applied, and you have to set a specific line of who have the rights and who have not the rights. But the local administration, and it's not only in Italy, there's many cases at the global level. But mainly in Italy, it depends on who have to address these issues. It's like the level of assistance. We've got only the health and ER emergency fix at national level, because of course, if you define it, then you have to pay it at a national level. As you know, the local the 90 between the 75 and 90% of social service expenses are local, not national. So and it's of course an issue. So we've got a lot of problems that put us very far from a clear definition about rights. So it really depends on that matters. And of course, it's the inequalities where product and reproduct putting at the last places the usually vulnerable ones. Sorry, another comparison with the work strategies. there's a great scholar. She's in relational. No, sorry, she study industrial relation in historical point of view, and she affirms that now in Western countries and in Western capitalism we are addressing the autonomous worker, the self-employed, because for the first time, adult male, enter in that vulnerable condition. And she said that for many years, women and immigrants, many usually considered disadvantaged categories, were autonomous, precarious, but no one cares because they are not at the center, no, the ideal type of. And I think that it's something similar happens also in housing policy, of course, in Rome. Now, Zevi, to answer the question about what the current administration is doing. Now, Rome is planning a new housing policy. We don't know many things, but they're trying to address new solutions. At the current moment, the link is always between developer, constructors, and administration. So it seems that nothing's changed, but the challenge is to see how the ranking, the new rules of rankings will be built. That's something that at the current stage we don't know. Then about vulnerable categories, disability is the only thing that administration look at, because it's something that has a law behind. Many vulnus, many lack in the national and also the local law about disability and the link between public administration and disability, but it's recognized, and it's the only things that it could be affected the ranking strategy and to put you in some right or not right places in terms to your right to have that kind of public response on your social issue. So this is more or less the
Yes,
I
Silvia.
try to address everything.
Thank you, Silvia. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, there was in Ferrara a very nice session on housing for disabled. I'm sorry that actually the speakers of that session are not here with us. But for those of you who are particularly interested in this issue, you can come back to me and I can put you in contact with the colleagues Ciro Tarantino and Maria Giulia Bernardini from the University of Ferrara were actually organizing the session, and it was a really fruitful discussion about that. I take advantage of seeing Ionela with us. First of all, because Ionela will be, and one of her colleagues will be the next speakers in this session of Civis Gender Studies Network seminars next month. I will remind to all of you in a second. And in the meantime, I put in the chat anyway the poster and also the link to the registration, to the recording of the previous seminars that you find on YouTube in on our channel, so that you can catch up with a full discussion. So I take the advantage of Ionela, because I don't know whether Ionela you follow this type of discussion for Romania, but quite recently, actually this morning, by coincidence, with another young colleague of mine that is here with me, Chiara Sciascia. Tomorrow we will present a paper in a conference with data concerning the so-called imputed rents. That refers to the fact that people receive a sort of indirect rent, so income, from owning their house, and of course, in that sense, not having to pay a rent to somebody else. So in comparing the situation for the European Union, we realize that in Romania is the maximum amount of numbers of people actually having imputed rents. So apparently, quite a lot of people in Romania not only own their own house, but of course have an advantage in terms of imputed rents, so in terms of virtuous income out of this. So I wonder whether in Romania there has been a specific policy, a specific law, also for women or for singles, what we were mentioning before, in terms of housing. So I take the opportunity of introducing you to the discussion, just to open also the floor for you next month, if you want to say something about that, because we were really surprised, to be honest, to see Romania really top of the chart in that sense. So
yeah, thank you, Marcella, for the kind introduction. Thank you, Silvia, for the presentation. I'm very interesting. I'm not working on this topic, but I am in an European project who studies, in fact, indirect and non-voluntary discrimination, and one of the area is housing. So I will have a PhD student who will study housing policies and in Bucharest. So I will know more on the topic next in the next period, and of course I will be back to you for more recommendation and maybe discussions with my PhD students. About the situation you talked about, Marcella, it's an heritage of the communist period, when they allocated house. Of course, there are pretty little apartments, but most of these apartments, they are communist buildings. You see a little bit the type, not very aesthetic, but there is a house. And the principle was that every family received, at the moment, depending on town and regions and so on, in Bucharest it was more difficult, but the principle was to allocate each family a house to have, because this was, in my opinion, one of the positive effects of the communist regime, this care for assuring a house for people. Once again, the conditions are not very good. A lot of these houses were very small, and it was also a criteria of rationalization of the space. So they allocated, I don't know, for single persons generally. We had before 1889 a sort of common buildings, the similar of I don't know, foyer d'étudiants. I don't know how to say it in English. Basically,
for students, residence for students, yeah.
Single rooms with common bathrooms and kitchens and so on. And then the small apartments, studio or apartments, were allocated for families, of course, because Ceausescu had a very strong reproductive policies, as you know. And then, I don't know, it was a heritage. It was also a very traditional culture who continue to value, to have the property is really, I would say, a social value to have his or her house. And then it's also economic reasons, because people don't, in the, for the, about, I think, 50% of the population, they don't afford to pay any taxes for a house. So they prefer, they leave, for instance, the parents and a young couple, wife and husband, two partners, and sometimes even with the first child, because they don't afford either to buy a new house or to pay for it. So I think there are mixed situation, but we assist to precarization of the condition of the population, and in big cities, the question of housing is very difficult. So yes, statistically we have the most number of properties, but then I think at the social, if we analyze from a social point of view, the situation became this last 10 years very, very difficult. And I was wondering, Silvia, because you talk about these life stories you used as the methods, what are the stories of these women besides, I don't know, the design of the public policies, I don't know, the authorities? What are they telling about the interaction with authorities, with others? Can you identify some specific elements on gender discrimination or on, I don't know, race discrimination in their stories?
What interested me the most is that more than half of these life stories share these are women that decide to break with their families because sexual orientation, because of the I don't want to marry, for example. I do not want to have children or child, it depends. And the main self-narratives of these women was based on autonomy, independence, social neighborhood context. That means if there's a story about a woman that were forced to move in one of these temporary residents, and she lived in the old center of Rome, very old house, not fancy, quite uncomfortable, but her. And she have to move to Ponte Bianca, that it's a place that's in the deep west with nothing around. I've got many photos, sorry, not now, but maybe if I can share. And these residences are mainly built in the middle of nowhere. We call it Cattedrali nel Deserto, that is cathedral in the desert. It means that you have a car to move if you want to buy something. But these women not have cars. The proximity, it's the main brick of their social life. Everything is in the neighborhood. Low expenses, low wages, but everything with a measure to their possibility. If you move them to another place and you put them in the condition that they need a capital, economic facilities, something that they said they, of course, haven't got it because they live just the next month in other way. And but in that case, the administration said, but we give you an answer. So formally, we were able to respond to your application. So it's not, and
well, yeah.
Just one thing, just one reference. If there's for the previous question about mainstream as a tools, there's about housing policies, and at the EU level, there's a great paper by Patrick Legales that explain perfectly how the gender mainstream was the main enemy in terms of housing policies at the EU level for the for the women. In that paper, it shows perfectly how something address to advance measure intervention instrument as the opposite result.
Silvia, can you please write a short reference in the chat, especially for Silvia was asking about possible solutions for these problems and so on, but also for answering Ionela. Unfortunately, the time is finished. So while Silvia writes in the chat, I just remind all of you about the next seminar by Ionela and Oana. I apologize, Ionela, I'm certainly wrong in the pronunciation, but I did my best. It concerns...
No, it's a perfect pronunciation.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
You're so kind. I'm pretty sure I did a mess. But anyway, both from the University of Bucharest on Wednesday, the 18th of October, always at 5 p.m., always on MinervaLab. They will talk about anti-gender campaigns in Romania, from parliament to radical right digital media. As you have probably seen also, the next two seminars will be from the colleagues, colleague Gerardo Meil of the University of Madrid. And finally, and that will be in November. And finally, we will have our last seminar for this year by the University of Glasgow, talking on the 13th of December. And that will be the occasion, of course, also to plan new activities for the coming year. Hopefully fully recognized by the Civis Alliance. So we can stop here for the registration. Everything will be available on our YouTube channel.